The truth, I've learned, doesn't always arrive like a freight train. Sometimes, it's a slow leak, a patient poison seeping into the foundations of your life until the whole structure groans under the weight of its own decay. For me, the final crack appeared late one Tuesday, in the cathedral silence of our living room. The only light was the spectral, cathode ray blue of a muted television, painting shifting ghosts on the walls of a life I no longer recognized. I was holding a wine glass, empty for at least an hour, its delicate stem a familiar weight between my fingers. I traced the rim, trying to conjure the ghost of a vintage, the memory of a shared bottle. I tried to remember the last time Emma and I had shared a genuine laugh, the kind that starts in the belly and spills out, unbidden and bright. Or a touch that wasn't purely functional, a brush of hands in passing, a perfunctory peck on the cheek. The memory was stubbornly, terrifyingly out of reach. It felt like forever. Emma, my wife of 5 years, was upstairs. She was in our bed, or at least, in the room that had once been the sanctum of our intimacy. Now it was just a room, another space partitioned by silence. She had long since abandoned the ritual of waiting up for me, and I, in turn, had stopped rushing to join her. What was the point? Our marriage had become a choreographed pantomime, a series of motions we performed out of habit, not affection. We didn't fight, not anymore. The quiet that had settled between us was a dense, suffocating thing, far louder than any argument we could ever have manufactured. When I first met her, Emma was an event. She didn't simply enter a room, she colonized it with her presence. Her energy was a magnetic field, pulling everyone into her orbit. Her laugh wasn't just a sound. It was an invitation, a promise of joy. I was a moth to her incandescent flame, drawn in, mesmerized, and ultimately singed. I fell for her with the reckless abandon of a man who believes he's found a law of nature, something as certain and undeniable as gravity. She was my partner, my equal, my everything. A litany of superlatives that now tasted like ash in my mouth. But sitting there, in the hollowed-out shell of our home, I couldn't escape the corrosive thought that the woman I married was long gone. Or worse, that she had been a brilliant, shimmering mirage, a projection of everything I wanted to see. The realization wasn't a punch to the gut. It was a slow, cold blade sliding between my ribs. Emma didn't love me. Not in the way I understood the word. Not in the way a wife should love her husband. To her, I had become a utility, a provider, a steady paycheck deposited every 2 weeks, a name co-signed on a mortgage. I was the architectural support beam holding up the life she wanted to build, essential but invisible. I was stability. I was the safety net stretched taut beneath her ambitions. And for a long, pathetic while, I had convinced myself that being essential was enough, that it was a form of love. It wasn't. For years, I had been a master of willful ignorance. I had cataloged the signs, filed them away under headings like stress, or growing pains, or the natural ebb and flow of marriage. The way her body would imperceptibly stiffen when I reached for her in the night. The litany of excuses, headaches, fatigue, early meetings, that became a wall between us. The look in her eyes when I'd whisper, "I love you." It wasn't affection or reciprocity. It was the quiet, weary acceptance of a debt being paid. It screamed of obligation. I tried to pinpoint the last time we had an honest conversation, a dialogue that wasn't a logistical exercise. It had been months. We were experts at discussing bills, coordinating schedules, debating the merits of different grocery delivery services. Everything was transactional, a line item on the ledger of our shared existence. I couldn't remember the last time we spoke of our dreams, our fears, or what we wanted for dinner without it feeling like another task to be checked off a list. That night, as the digital clock on the cable box bled past midnight, I forced myself to stare into the abyss. Emma didn't see me as her husband. She saw me as a role to be filled, a function to be performed. And the most damning part of it all, I had let her. I had acquiesced to my own erasure, shrinking myself down bit by bit in the desperate, foolish hope that if I became small enough, unobtrusive enough, she might one day look down and notice me again. That she would look at me with the same incandescent admiration, the same unguarded passion, the same love she had in the beginning. That day never came. And as the silence in the room pressed in on me, I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that it never would. The weight of this truth was suffocating. A primal scream built in my chest, a desire to storm upstairs, to shake her awake and demand answers, to ask her when I had become a ghost in my own life. But what would be the point? She would likely roll over, her face a mask of annoyance, mutter something dismissive, and retreat back into the comfortable oblivion of sleep. Confrontation wasn't her language. Avoidance was her native tongue. I set the empty glass down on the coffee table. The soft clink was an obscenity in the profound quiet. Leaning my head back against the sofa, I let the silence engulf me, swallow me whole. It wasn't just the marriage that felt dead. It was me. I had lost myself in this elaborate charade, playing the part of the contented husband in a play with no audience. But the performance was over. I couldn't pretend anymore. Something had to change. Whether it was me, or her, or the entire damned edifice of our relationship, I didn't know. All I knew, with the clarity of a man staring down his own mortality, was that I could not continue to live like this. I deserved more than a loveless partnership. I deserved to be seen, to be wanted, to be loved. That night, sitting alone in the blue-tinged dark, a decision took root in the barren soil of my heart. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I could no longer cling to the beautifully curated memories of a past that no longer existed. It was time to face the truth, no matter how much it hurt. It was time to burn the whole thing down. It's a cruel trick of the mind, the way it clings to the golden hour of a relationship when everything else has turned to dusk. Your memory becomes a highlight reel, replaying the moments of laughter and love on an endless loop, a constant, taunting reminder of what has been lost. I used to indulge in those memories, back when I still believed Emma and I were at the beginning of a forever kind of love. We met at a rooftop party, one of those aggressively cool gatherings in late autumn where everyone pretends they aren't freezing for the sake of the skyline. I saw her across a sea of shivering hipsters, laughing at something a friend had said. Her whole face was illuminated, a supernova in a dim galaxy. She possessed an energy that felt gravitational. I was being pulled toward her before my brain had even processed the command to move. "Hi," I'd managed, my voice probably an octave higher than intended. She turned, and for a syncopated beat, the air left my lungs. "Hi," she replied, and her smile was warmer than the whiskey I was nervously clutching. The connection was instantaneous, a cliché ripped from the pages of a screenplay I would have scoffed at. We talked for hours, building a small island for two in the middle of the party. She was sharp, witty, effervescent, and for reasons I couldn't comprehend, she seemed utterly captivated by me. By the time we exchanged numbers, I walked the 20 blocks home feeling like I'd just pulled off the heist of the century. Our first date was just coffee, but we could have been in a palace. Emma had a gift for making the mundane feel magical. She laughed at my terrible jokes, a full-throated, infectious sound that made me want to become a comedian just to hear it on command. Those early days were a dizzying montage of late-night diners, spontaneous road trips where the destination didn't matter, and conversations that lasted until the sun came up. I had never felt so seen, so completely and utterly alive. When I proposed a year later, on a blanket in the park as the sun bled across the horizon, it felt like the most logical, natural act in the world. Before I could even articulate the question, she tackled me, her laughter and tears mingling in the twilight air. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes," she'd said, and in that moment, I was the luckiest man on earth. Our wedding was small, intimate, and so saturated with love it felt tangible. I remember watching her walk down the aisle, a vision in white, and thinking with absolute certainty that I would never witness anything more perfect. We were going to have the kind of marriage people wrote novels about. And for a while we did. The honeymoon phase was everything it was cracked up to be, a sun-drenched dream of tangled limbs and shared futures. We mapped out our lives together, plotting travels and homes and children on the vast, open canvas of our future. We had all the time in the world. But somewhere, imperceptibly at first, the color began to leach from the canvas. It was a subtle shift, like a barometer dropping before a storm. The laughter became less frequent. Date nights were postponed, then forgotten. The occasional argument lingered, leaving a bitter residue that took longer and longer to dissipate. I told myself it was normal, the inevitable transition from passion to partnership. Now, as I sit here, a ghost in my own home, I sift through those memories like an archaeologist searching for the exact point of fracture. Was it after that first, truly vicious fight? Was it when our careers became more demanding than our relationship? The truth is, I don't know when the cracks began to spiderweb across the foundation. All I know is that what we built on love now feels like it was built on sand. It's excruciating to remember the woman who looked at me as if I held the sun in my hands, and reconcile her with the woman who now barely looks at me at all. But I hold on to those memories, those brilliant, painful shards of light. They are my proof that it was real. They are the standard by which I now know what I deserve to feel again. If you had told me 4 years ago that Emma, the woman who used to trace the lines of my face as if committing them to memory, would one day treat me with the cool indifference of a stranger, I would have laughed. It was an impossibility, a fiction, yet here we were living it. The change was a slow erosion, not a landslide. It began a year or two in, a series of small, almost imperceptible shifts. A hand pulled away a fraction of a second too soon. A vacant look when I was telling a story. Excuses to avoid spending time together that were just plausible enough to be believed. At first, I diagnosed it as stress. We were both working punishing hours, striving to build the future we'd mapped out. But the symptoms persisted long after the deadlines passed and the projects were completed. This wasn't stress. This was something else. I remember the night I tried to perform CPR on our dying intimacy. I orchestrated an entire evening. Candles casting flickering shadows, a playlist of our songs, her favorite expensive wine, a dinner I'd spent hours meticulously, if clumsily, preparing. I wanted to surprise her, to rewind the clock to a time when our company was all the entertainment we needed. She came home, her keys clattering into the ceramic bowl by the door, and her reaction was a bucket of ice water. "What's all this?" she asked, her voice flat, devoid of curiosity or pleasure as she shrugged off her coat. "It's a surprise," I said, my own excitement feeling suddenly foolish and overwrought. "I thought we could have a nice night in." She glanced at the carefully set table, then back at me, her expression unreadable. "That's sweet, David, but I'm exhausted. Can we just do this another time?" She walked past me, the scent of her perfume a mocking trail in her wake. I stood there, dumbfounded, as the candles burned down, the food grew cold, and the silence thickened. That night, I followed her into the bedroom, determined to get an answer. "Emma," I began, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Is everything okay? You've been distant." She looked up from the relentless scroll of her phone, her expression a cocktail of irritation and boredom. "David, not everything has to be a referendum on our relationship. I'm just tired, okay?" Her words were a dismissal, but I pressed on. "It's not just tonight. It feels like we're not us anymore. I miss you, Emma. I miss us." She sighed, a sound heavy with exasperation, and set her phone down. "David, we've been married for 4 years. Things change. It's not always going to be like the beginning. That's just life. But it doesn't have to be like this," I pleaded, hearing the crack in my own voice. "We can work on it. I'll do whatever it takes." She shook her head, her tone sharpening, becoming a weapon. "I don't need you to fix anything, David. I'm fine. Maybe you're the one with the problem." That was the turning point. It wasn't just her words. It was the chilling void in her eyes. There was no love there, no warmth, not even anger. There was just apathy. After that, the chasm between us widened into a canyon. Intimacy became a rare, mechanical act, something performed out of a sense of marital duty. There was no passion, no connection, just two bodies going through the motions. I tried to tell myself it was a phase, that the woman I loved would eventually return. But deep down, I knew better. The worst part wasn't that she didn't see me the way she used to. It was that I wasn't sure she even wanted to. One night, months later, we were sitting on opposite ends of the sofa, the television blaring to fill the vacuum between us. "Emma," I said, breaking the ceasefire, "do you even want to be married anymore?" She didn't look at me, her eyes fixed on the screen. "What kind of question is that?" "A serious one," I replied. "Because it doesn't feel like you do." She finally turned, her face a mask of annoyance. "David, just because I'm not fawning all over you every second doesn't mean I don't want to be married. Not everyone has to be as clingy as you are." Clingy. Asterisk the word was a perfectly aimed dart, striking a nerve I didn't know was so exposed. I wasn't being clingy. I was a drowning man reaching for a life raft. But in her eyes, My desperation was just a nuisance. That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the truth began to crystallize. Emma wasn't just indifferent. She was a tenant in our life, not a partner. Whatever love we once had was gone, and I had absolutely no idea how to get it back. Desperation turns you into a stranger to yourself. It makes you a frantic, fumbling version of the person you thought you were, a man throwing everything he has against a locked door, refusing to believe it won't open. That's who I became. Desperate David. A one-man crusade to save a marriage that had already flatlined. I launched a full-scale campaign to win back my wife. If she was unhappy, I would manufacture her happiness. If she wanted space, I'd measure it out for her. If she wanted attention, I'd smother her in it. No stone was left unturned, no gesture too grand or too small. It started with the small things. Flowers delivered to her office, not just on special occasions, but on random Tuesdays. Her favorite, complicated sushi order waiting on the table when she got home from a long day. Handwritten notes with inside jokes tucked into her purse. I was trying to leave a trail of breadcrumbs to remind her of the man she fell in love with. Instead of gratitude, I was met with a weary tolerance. David, you don't have to do all this, she said one night, pushing aside a container of perfectly arranged sashimi. I want to. I replied, trying to keep the pleading note out of my voice. I want you to be happy. She sighed, her gaze fixed on her phone. It's just a lot sometimes. You don't have to try so hard. Try so hard. Asterisk, the phrase echoed in my mind. Was that the problem? Was my effort the very thing pushing her away? Still, I pressed on, a fool's optimism my only fuel. I suggested date nights, movies, dinners, concerts, a forced return to our courtship rituals. She'd agree, but her enthusiasm was a flimsy facade. More often than not, she'd cancel at the last minute with a vague excuse. When she did show up, she was a physical presence only, her mind clearly elsewhere, her attention devoted to the glowing screen in her hand. It felt like dining with the ghost of the woman I used to know. When the small gestures failed, I escalated. I planned a romantic weekend getaway, a picturesque cabin nestled in the mountains, hoping a change of scenery would shock our relationship back to life. It was a disaster from the moment we packed the car. It's so far, she complained. Why couldn't we just stay in town? She spent the entire drive cocooned in her headphones, staring out the window. At the cabin, she barely registered the breathtaking view before retreating to the bedroom. I tried to salvage the trip with a candlelit dinner and a walk by the lake, but she was a ghost, offering only hollow smiles and monosyllabic replies. By the time we drove home in strained silence, I felt emotionally bankrupt. Therapy was my last, desperate gambit. Maybe we should talk to someone, I suggested one night. A therapist. She raised an eyebrow. Fine, she shrugged, her lack of enthusiasm a blaring red flag. If you think it will help. It didn't. In the therapist's neutral-toned office, Emma was a master of evasion. Her answers were clipped, her engagement minimal. When asked how she felt about our relationship, her response was a chillingly simple. I think it's fine. Fine. Asterisk, the word haunted me. How could this wasteland of a marriage be fine? After 3 sessions, she declared it a waste of time. I don't think this is helping, she announced, and I didn't have the energy to argue. I had exhausted every option, depleted every reserve of hope. I was trying to single-handedly resurrect something Emma didn't even seem to believe was dead. One night, sitting alone in the living room, the blank television screen reflecting my own empty expression, the weight of it all finally crushed me. I couldn't do this alone. I couldn't save a marriage that only one of us wanted to save. I had done everything I could think of. The ball was in her court now, but I had the sinking, gut-wrenching feeling she wasn't even going to bother picking it up. I thought I had become immune to her capacity to surprise me, that I had seen the full spectrum of her indifference. I was wrong. The bombshell she dropped was so unexpected, so utterly disconnected from our reality, that for a moment I thought I was hallucinating. It was a Saturday morning. I was at the kitchen table, nursing a coffee, trying to find the will to face another weekend of cavernous silence. She breezed in, a whirlwind of purpose, and poured herself a glass of orange juice without a glance in my direction. We should start trying for a baby, she said. Her tone was as casual as if she were suggesting we repaint the living room. I nearly choked, the hot coffee scalding my throat. What? She turned to face me, leaning against the counter, a picture of serene deliberation. A baby. It's the next logical step, isn't it? I stared at her, my mind scrambling to process the words. Emma, are you serious? Of course I'm serious, she said, her voice tinged with impatience, as if I were being deliberately obtuse. We've been married for 5 years. This is what married couples do. Her words hit me like a physical blow. Married couples. A generic, abstract category. Not us. Not you and me, David and Emma. Emma. I began, my voice dangerously unsteady. We haven't exactly been in a good place. Don't you think we should work on us before bringing a child into this? She rolled her eyes, a gesture that had become her primary form of communication. David, not everything has to be perfect. People have kids all the time when things aren't perfect. This isn't about not perfect, I said, my frustration finally boiling over. We barely speak. We are not intimate. We are roommates who share a mortgage. And you want to have a baby? What? She shrugged, taking a sip of her juice. Because it's the next step. That's what people do, David. They get married. They buy a house. They have kids. They build a life. Isn't that what you wanted? What I wanted, I said slowly, each word a heavy stone, was a partner. A life with someone who loves me. Who wants to build something with me. Not this. My words seemed to glance off her, leaving no mark. Her expression remained placid, detached. I don't see what the problem is, she said finally. You'd make a wonderful father. And what about you? I asked, my voice low. Do you want to be a mother? Or is this just another checkbox you need to tick off on your life plan? That finally got a reaction. A flicker of something, anger? Surprise? Crossed her face before the mask of calm descended again. She hesitated. Why does it matter? She asked, her voice hardening. You're overthinking this, David. It's not that complicated. Not that complicated. Asterisk, the phrase became a mantra of madness in my head for the rest of the day. A baby. She didn't want a baby with me. She wanted a baby because it was item 3.4 on her life's agenda. I was merely a necessary component, a sperm donor with a good credit score. That night, lying in bed, the space between us a frozen tundra, the full weight of my predicament crashed down on me. This wasn't about the baby. It was about everything. The years of trying, of hoping, of convincing myself that my love alone could be enough to sustain us. I saw the truth with blinding, horrifying clarity. Emma wasn't interested in fixing our marriage. She didn't care about the cracks in the foundation. She just wanted to plaster over them with a new project, a new phase, and continue on as if the rot didn't exist. The next morning, I did something I never thought I would do. I called a lawyer. I'm not ready to file, I told the calm, professional voice on the other end of the line. I need to know what my options are. As she walked me through the process, a strange, cold clarity settled over me. For the first time in years, I knew exactly what I had to do. The decision to draft divorce papers was not an act of anger. It was an act of survival. It was the final, quiet admission that I could not set myself on fire to keep her warm, especially when she didn't even seem to notice the cold. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, the morning sun streaming in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air as the lawyer's email arrived. The attachment was there, a sterile, impersonal document that signified the end of my world as I knew it. My hand trembled as I opened it. Reading the clinical language of separation, of division of assets, felt like an out-of-body experience. Divorce was something that happened to other people, a narrative I consumed in movies and overheard conversations. It was never supposed to be my story. That night, the envelope containing the papers sat on the chair beside me like a dormant bomb. Emma sat across the dinner table, her face illuminated by the glow of her phone, utterly oblivious to the tectonic shift about to occur. Emma, I said, my voice hoarse. She glanced up, her expression a blank slate. What? We need to talk. She set her phone down with a put-upon sigh. About what? I took a deep breath, my fingers clenching. About us. About our marriage. A flicker of irritation. David, if this is another one of your we need to fix things speeches, I'm really not in the mood. It's not, I said, my voice finding a sudden, surprising strength. I've tried to fix things. For years. But I can't do it alone anymore. She tilted her head, her gaze sharpening. What are you saying? I slid the envelope across the polished wood of the table. The sound it made was unnaturally loud in the quiet room. Her eyes darted from the envelope to my face, confusion curdling into shock. What is this? She whispered. Divorce papers, I said. The words tasted like poison and freedom all at once. I've made my decision, Emma. This, whatever this is, it's not a marriage. And I can't keep pretending that it is. The color drained from her face. She stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. You can't be serious, she finally breathed, her voice rising in disbelief. Divorce? Are you kidding me, David? I'm not. I replied, my tone firm. I have spent years trying to make this work, trying to get back to a place where we actually cared about each other. But it's clear you don't want that. Her hands balled into fists, her face contorting with a sudden, hot anger. You're overreacting. All marriages go through rough patches. This is just a phase. A phase, I said, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Emma, this has been our entire reality for years. You've made it perfectly clear you're not interested in fixing anything. You don't even want to try. She shot up from her chair, the legs scraping violently against the floor. So that's it. You're just giving up? Throwing everything we built away. I shook my head, a wave of profound sadness washing over the anger. I'm not giving up. I already gave everything I had. I tried and I tried and I tried, Emma. But I can't be the only one fighting for this marriage. Tears welled in her eyes, but I couldn't decipher them. Were they tears of sadness for us, or tears of fury at losing control? How could you do this to me? She whispered, her voice trembling. I wanted to tell her this wasn't about her, not really. It was about me, about my survival, but I knew she wouldn't understand. In her narrative, she was the victim of my sudden, inexplicable betrayal. I didn't make this decision lightly, I said softly. But I can't keep living like this, Emma. I deserve more. We both do. She stood frozen, tears spilling down her cheeks. For a moment, a wild, foolish part of me hoped she would fight for us, really fight. That she would drop the act and tell me she loved me. Instead, she turned without another word and walked out of the room. The click of the door closing behind her was the sound of an ending. Alone with the papers, I felt a strange and volatile cocktail of relief and grief. Relief that the pretense was finally over. Grief for the love we'd lost and the future that would now never be. For the first time in years, I felt like I was finally taking control of my own story, even if it meant tearing out the last several chapters. The weeks that followed my departure were a masterclass in Emma's particular brand of psychological warfare. I had foolishly imagined a clean break, a quiet and dignified end. But Emma was not one to let go of something she considered hers, even if she no longer valued it. I moved into my sister's spare room, a small, temporary sanctuary. The first few days were a blur of disorientation and a profound, bone-deep relief. Waking up without the oppressive weight of Emma's indifference was like breathing fresh air after years in a sealed room. Then, the campaign began. It started with texts. Asterisk, I miss you. Can we please talk? Don't throw this away, David. Asterisk, I ignored them, assuming they would taper off. They didn't. They intensified, becoming more frequent, more desperate. Asterisk, please come back. I'll change, I promise. We can make this work. Just give me one more chance. I can't do this without you. Asterisk, each message was a guilt-laced hook, and I had to fight the urge to bite. When the texts went unanswered, she moved to voicemails. Long, rambling monologues that swung wildly between tearful apologies and furious accusations. One message would be a sobbing plea, reminding me of our first date, our wedding day. The next would be a venomous tirade. Asterisk, you're being so selfish, David. You're throwing everything away. How could you do this to us? Asterisk. Then came the photographs, sent to my email. Digital ghosts from our past. A picture of us on our honeymoon, tan and laughing, her head on my shoulder. The caption read, asterisk, remember this? We can get back to this, David. Please. Asterisk, for a heart-stopping moment. The nostalgia was a physical force, pulling me back. But then I remembered the years of lonely nights, the feeling of being invisible, and the spell was broken. When sentimentality failed, she resorted to pure, unadulterated anger. You're pathetic, one text read. Running away because you couldn't handle being a real husband. Her words were designed to wound, to find my insecurities and press down hard. They stung, but they also clarified. This wasn't a woman mourning a lost love. This was a CEO furious at a hostile takeover. She was sorry for losing control. My sister found me one night, staring at my phone, the screen glowing with another of Emma's digital assaults. "You need to block her, David," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "She's not going to stop until you make it impossible." It felt like a final, brutal act of severance, but I knew she was right. Hitting block was a quiet, anticlimactic click, but the silence that followed was monumental. It was the first time in years I felt truly free from the gravitational pull of her moods, her expectations, her manipulations. I was finally, blessedly alone. In that liberating silence, I began the slow, arduous process of rebuilding. I found a small apartment downtown, a blank canvas. I filled it not with things, but with myself. Books I'd always meant to read, art I'd always admired, a vintage record player that filled the space with the warm crackle of old vinyl. I reconnected with friends I'd let drift away, discovering with a pang of regret how isolated I had become. I picked up my old guitar, my fingertips raw and clumsy at first, and found solace in the simple, honest chords. One evening, unpacking a long-forgotten box, I found an old photo of us, the one from our honeymoon. I looked at the laughing, carefree woman in the picture, and then I thought of the stranger she had become. I didn't feel anger anymore, or even regret. I felt a quiet, somber acceptance. That chapter was over. It had taught me more than I ever wanted to know about love and loss. But it had also, in its painful conclusion, taught me the vital importance of choosing yourself. My sister came over for dinner, and as we sat on my new sofa, she looked at me with a knowing smile. "You seem different," she said. "Happier." I thought about it. She was right. Life after Emma wasn't perfect. It was messy and complicated, but it was mine. Every decision, every note from my guitar, every step forward, it was all my own. And that, I was beginning to realize, was worth everything. It was a Friday evening, 6 months after I'd left, when the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I was at my sister's house, sitting on her back porch, watching the sky fade from bruised purple to inky black. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Matt, a mutual friend from our old life. "Hey man, weird to ask, but thought you'd want to know. Emma's seeing someone. A guy named Ryan. Total character. Let me know if you want the dirt. Asterisk." My heart gave a strange, complicated lurch. Details? Did I want details? A morbid curiosity, the kind that makes you slow down at a car wreck, won out. "Spill," I texted back. A moment later, a photo appeared. It was Emma, grinning at a bar, her arms slung around a man who looked like the physical embodiment of a dead-end job. He was tall, but his shirt was a roadmap of wrinkles, and his hair was a disheveled mess. Matt's follow-up text was dripping with schadenfreude. Asterisk, unemployed musician. Lives with his mom. Thinks he's the next Kurt Cobain. Thought you'd get a kick out of that. Asterisk. I let out a short, sharp laugh. Ryan was the antithesis of everything Emma had ever claimed to value. Stability, ambition, success, the very pillars she had judged my own worth against, were completely absent in this man. And yet, there she was, smiling like she'd won the lottery. It wasn't jealousy I felt. It was the dizzying, clarifying shock of a great cosmic joke being revealed. All those years, I had twisted myself into knots trying to be the man she wanted, the provider, the stable one, the rock. I had shouldered the responsibility of her happiness, believing my failure to provide it was a personal failing. Now I saw the truth. It was never about me. Her demands, her standards, her expectations, they weren't principles. They were tools. They were the levers she used to control her environment, to shape me into the predictable, reliable foundation she needed at that stage of her life. Her unhappiness wasn't my fault. It was a fundamental part of her, a void she kept trying to fill with external things. A perfect husband, a perfect house, a baby. When I refused to be a passive part of her construction project any longer, she simply moved on and found a new one. Ryan wasn't a partner. He was a rebellion, a project of a different kind. A week later, I ran into Matt at a coffee shop. "So," he said, sliding into the chair across from me, "what do you think of Emma's new guy?" I shrugged, taking a sip of my coffee. "Honestly, I think they deserve each other." He looked surprised. "A little harsh, no?" "Not really," I said, leaning back. "Her choices don't surprise me anymore. If she's happy, good for her. If she's not, well, that's not my problem." Matt studied me for a moment. "You seem good, David. Really good." "I am," I replied, and the words felt solid, real, true. Walking out of the coffee shop into the cool night air, I felt a sense of peace that was so profound it was almost startling. Emma's new life wasn't a reflection on me or what we'd had. It was simply her story, continuing on a path I was no longer on. My anger was gone, replaced by a quiet, liberating indifference. I was no longer a character in her narrative. The chapter was closed, the book was shelved. And for the first time, I felt truly, completely, ready to start writing my own.